Okay, so here we have our light painting image of a doll with some nice, beautiful streaks of light in the background. We did raw process this image to be a little more blue in tint, and also we adjusted the exposure so that the doll had good detail, so that there wasn't any areas in the white that was overexposed. And we added a little bit of contrast and also made it a little bit blacker. So the first step we're going to take is we're going to duplicate the layer, and we're going to call it our working image. Click OK. And I'm going to crop in to see if there's any retouching that needs to be done. Just small little specks of dust. And I can see that there is definitely some retouching that needs to be done on this image. So if I come over here to image adjustments, for example, and if I were to lighten it up a little bit, you would see the dust becoming a lot more pronounced. So I just wanted to point that out, like right here and there, and here's a little red speck, there's another little red speck. So that's what we want to retouch, okay? So I'm going to go in with my cloning stamp tool, adjust my brush down. I'm going to use a 60% opacity, and I'm going to go in and remove especially those red spots and some of the dust areas. Just clean up the image and make sure there's nothing. I want my blacks to be purely black. I don't want to see any imperfections. I'm going to clean this up right here around the stand. See a lot of little dust spots. I want to get rid of all of that. And I'm doing this all on my working image. Make my brush a little smaller. It's going to take a while. Now I'm going to move over to the right side. Not as much to do, it looks like, on this side. And what we have here is dust on the camera, probably, dust on the lens. That's usually what causes this. Okay, so let's bring this up. And I see a little bit there. It's really subtle, but if we print the image, it may show up, and we wouldn't want that. So I'm going to move over now and look at this side. I'm going to move up the image and look at the. I'm going to move across and move up to the corner. I'm looking for red spots and little white spots. Red, and I see a little white one right here, and another little red one. So if I turn my back up and turn off, you're probably not going to see much of a difference between my working image and my background because those spots were quite subtle. But they could impact the final printing, and that's why it's really important that we go in and retouch that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to evaluate this image and kind of figure out what it is I want to do. I want these rays of light that are behind her, I want them to become a different color. I'm thinking I want them to become kind of like a rainbow color behind her. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually come in, I'm going to add a solid color, and I'm going to come up to the brightest of the reds and add a solid, just a pure solid color of red. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to click on my blending modes, and I'm going to highlight my blending mode, and I'm going to use my little roller key on my mouse, and I'm going to go in and double check the color. And I could use color mode if I want to, or I could use hue. I think I like the way the hue looks. However, I don't want the red to be on everything, so I'm going to go on my layer mask now. Go in with a nice soft brush. Make sure it's soft. I'm going to use 100% opacity on this, and I'm going to remove it completely off the areas I don't want. Okay, so I want to have this be kind of like a rainbow color behind her. Alright, so I've got my red. I'm going to add a little bit more red up here. Maybe I'll take some of it off just a little bit here. Okay, so now my next color is going to be orange. So I'm going to come in with orange. A nice bright orange. That's why I would go up to the very corner here. And now I'm going to again go to hue. And I'm going to go on my layer mask again, and I'm going to 100% opacity remove this orange completely off the image, except for the area where I want it to be. So I want it to be kind of underneath the red area. So I'm going to make a smaller brush. I'm going to go in with my orange here, just kind of bring in the orange tone. I don't want her to be impacted by it, so I'm going to make sure I go back in and remove any orange tone from my little doll figure here. Accidentally got a little bit too much off, so I'm going to go back in and just carefully put that gray, nice bright neon light behind her with orange. So now I've got red and orange. My next solid color, we can see my layer mask here at the top. I'm building the red, kind of the center top here. It has a little bit of orange. Now my next color is going to be yellow. So I'm going to click on a nice yellow, go right to the very bright yellow there. And again, I'm going to select hue as my blending mode. Actually, I might try color. I think I like the intensity of that a little better. Now I'm going to come back in and remove all of the yellow. Except for the center part. Okay, this yellow beam on the center. Okay. So we start to see 100% opacity on my brush, so I can remove all the yellow color, and the layer mask becomes a solid black area where I don't want yellow. And I don't want it on my doll, so I'm going to go in and remove it off my doll very carefully, so that I don't accidentally get on actually I'm just going to completely move it off of here like this, and then go back in and reverse it with a very small brush. So I'm going to go in with a really tiny brush, close on my little, I'm going to get in really close with Control Plus and really zoom in so I can be very, very careful on putting back in that yellow. My doll, so I have to remove some of it a little bit off the edge here. little bit here off the edge. Make the brush slightly bigger. Do it a little faster here. I'm removing the yellow off the edge. Because I want my yellow only to be on that one neon beam that's coming through here. Go all the way up to the top. Taking off the yellow from this darker background. Okay, so just taking off that yellow. But I'm doing it with a very small brush. I have a lot of control about on what I'm doing here. Making sure it's off the doll. Right along that edge here. Okay, I'm thinking that I need the yellow to come a little bit more into the image. It's starting to be a little bit more yellow, I think, right down here, because this beam here, so like behind her, a little more yellow behind her shirt. I'm actually going to make all of this kind of yellow here and have it come right up. This, I'm thinking this whole section right here, we have a nice yellow color in here. Yellow color in there. Going with a little bit of a smaller brush. Get in between her hair here because we need to put that yellow as well. Okay, so I'm gonna, yeah, you really have to go in with a small brush and really control those corners, those edges. Make sure that you are staying exactly where you want it to be. Okay, now I'm going to go Control minus and zoom out and look at the work. Okay, so now my next solid color is going to be green. Click on green. Come up and pick a nice bright green. I'm going to change that to hue to see how that looks. Then I'm going to try color to see if I like the intensity of that a little better. Yes, I do. So I'm using hue and color both. Those are the ones I'm using mainly. The brush nice and big. And I'm going to go in and remove the green from the areas that should not be green because that's yellow right there. Right in here should be green. Some more of that back. Maybe we'll put the opacity down just a little bit so that we can control this a little more, putting in our green. I'm going to have to take the green off her clothes. We'll come back in here and take that green off her clothes, off her body a little bit. Going with a smaller brush. Go back in and add a little bit of green. Where I accidentally took it off and I didn't mean to. go Control Plus, I can double check that to make sure it's in the right place. Alrighty, let's see here. We can go all the way up to here. I'm going to undo a little bit here on her blouse, on the doll. A little bit of green spilled onto her skin and onto her shirt. Okay. So Control minus, go out. Now we got blue. I'm just going to keep the blue that's already there. Why not? And then let's add a purple layer. Probably do a color blend on that. Take a nice big brush at 100% opacity, and we're going to take all the purple off. The areas that we don't want. I'm going to add a little more purple at the bottom here. Now I'm going to go in with a very tiny brush and take the purple off of the doll. So I don't want the purple on the doll. I want her to be the color that she normally is. One thing I might do, I may add a color overlay on the doll to give her an interesting look. Actually, I think I might keep the skeleton purple. I think it looks pretty cool. Purple. So I'm going to keep the skeleton on the ground purple. Just keep this whole base purple. Just going to take it off her shoe and her leg. So maybe I might go in with a lower opacity and start maybe putting back some of the colors just slightly, just to kind of give the doll a little bit of a purple hinge. A little bit of a purple tinge to her shoes and her legs, but not too much because I don't want it to overdo it, so I might remove some of that purple off her leg, off her shoe a little bit. And let's go back on the green. And I'm thinking, again, I might remove some of the green and just maybe give her shirt a little bit of a green tinge. Just slightly, and then go back in on the yellow, a little bit of a yellow tinge on her body, and then go back on the orange and maybe a little bit of orange on the top here. And then go back in on the skirt, get that a little bit of a purple tinge. That looks kind of interesting. Having the doll take on a little bit of the color tinges. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to add a vignette to this. I'm going to come up here to solid color. I'm going to add a black vignette. And go in with my big brush. 24 and with an opacity of like 40. And go in and remove it. Just I want it to have a nice little bit of black on the edges. Look at the vignette, it's starting to kind of look a little bit of like an oval shape. So a little bit of black around the edges. Alright, the final touch I'm going to add to this image is I'm going to give this doll a little bit of a motion blur. So what I'm going to do is I am going to give it a motion blur, and you can see here that I went in and went back on my history and actually put back in exactly what I'm going to be doing, which is I'm going to blur this edge here. So I went back before I took a step backward and I actually had deleted it so that you could kind of see it without. So I'll go ahead and turn that off. So there it is without the motion blur. Okay, so here's the working image, and I showed you a minute ago the actual motion blur, what it looks like. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate that image. I'm going to call it motion blur and say OK. I'm going to come up here to filter, blur, motion blur, and I'm going to really blur it a lot. And I want it to be at a 0 angle, so just flat across, and I'm going to put in like about 200 pixels. Say OK. I'm going to come over here and add a layer mask, and I'm going to go in with my paintbrush, a nice big brush, and I'm pretty much going to remove most of them. I'm going to remove pretty much all the motion blur right now. Okay, it's going to remove it at. I'm not going to be blurring the neon lights, just along the edge of the doll a little bit. But first, I want to just completely remove it because I want to have a lot of control as to where I put it. So I want to go in and just remove it all initially. And then I'm going to go back in with my brush and I'm going to add it just along the body of the doll. So I'm going to reverse my palette here and I'm going to go in with a smaller brush. And I'm going to do an opacity of like 50% so I can kind of control this a little more. I'm going to go around the edge here and I'm going to start putting back in blur. And we can see here that it's starting to show up along the right side of the doll. The more I go in, the more the blur shows up. I'm going to add it just along the right side of the doll. That's the only area that I want there to be motion blur. Okay. And then I'm going to save this in the U drive in my folder called Light Painting, Still Life Light Painting. I'm going to save it in there. And that's it.